welcome to another episode of the Tell Not Show. As always, we are your hosts. We have the wonderful Kirsha Fox, author of newly released Son of Deception, upcoming book. We get to see the cover soon. So excited for that. Homeschooling mom of 4 and avid gamer.
All right. And this is my co-host, Julia J.K. Allen. She's an editor, author, and author coach. She writes fantasy and horror, and she loves to sprinkle magic on everything. Thank you so much for joining us today.
And we're so excited for our guest today. We have the wonderful Kennedy Sutton on. So,
yes. Kennedy Sutton. I have read every single book she's put out yet. I love her pieces.
Yeah.
So here's what you should know about her. Kennedy Sutton is an emerging author of period romance and fantasy romance. The Silver Locket books are her first published works. She grew up in a small town in Wyoming and spent her youth wishing she was somewhere big and full of people. And as an adult, she moved to one of those large cities in the United States. She lived there for a time and then promptly returned to a small town as soon as she was able to. She has always been full of stories, but it was not until she became a mother that she started writing them down. She's thrilled now to share them with the world.
So, wonderful meeting you again.
And then thank you.
We'll talk about, tell us a little bit about your writing journey and you becoming an author.
Well, I started writing when my son was born. My son was born 3.5 years ago, and he was born with colic and dairy allergies and just about everything else you can think of that would make it so that a newborn didn't sleep. And we tried everything. And I was up every 90 minutes for the first year of his life, all night long. And he never napped unless he was on me. And I spent a lot of time in the rocking chair singing songs to him. And my history is originally in music. And then in the visual arts, I have a lot of different passions. And while I was in music and in musical theater, I studied everything from Italian arias to Spanish operas to a lot of folk songs. And I would sing him these folk songs and these sea shanties. And in the middle of the night, my sleep-addled brain just started coming up with characters that would sing these songs. And the more I thought about them, the more I wanted to create that story. And that's how Bennett Holt was created. And that's how Mickey Compton came to exist. Was they were people that I came up with and put faces to the men who would sing these songs and write these songs that I was singing to my son. And so that's kind of how I got started writing. And I invented my female character, Jane, who doesn't know anything about ships because I didn't know anything about ships at the time, other than that I really liked them. And so I created a character who didn't know anything about ships so that me and the reader, even though I never intended to publish, me and the reader, my invisible audience that I was imagining in my head, would be able to learn alongside her. And so I tried to put all of these technical terms that I was learning into terms that she would understand, which were terms that I would understand and terms that a reader would understand. And so the thing that got me writing was having children and not having any friends in my friend group. None of my friends had children. And so it was very isolating, very exhausting. And I just sort of invented imaginary friends, and they're still my imaginary friends.
Yes. No, I love that. There's such a whimsy about kind of your origin story as an author, right? That in this moment of stress and new motherhood, and you just have this poor child who just is awake and screaming all the time, that you turned into to this wonderful imaginative world where you're just like, okay, I have this baby, but also what's the story behind these songs that I'm singing? I love that. That, like I said, it seems so whimsical. Like when people always say I want to live like a Studio Ghibli film. Yeah. This is the type of existence I imagine. Is just singing to my child and then coming up with this whole story behind the song.
Yes.
Yeah.
If there's anything I really love, it's books that not only have a really good story, but they sneakily teach you things that you
Mhm.
would never have thought to seek out on your own. Um,
Right, right. It sounds like your books are also very informative as well.
They're full of that.
mhm.
I can't help it. They would be real dry reads if I wrote them the way I planned to.
Ah! Right. So what made you choose romances in particular?
Well, I wouldn't know how to write a non-romance. Might
Mhm.
be the best answer to that. Is that originally it I didn't I didn't know anything about genre writing when I started
Mm.
writing. I really started writing just like I have a story in my heart and I'm going to
Mm.
write it. And it turned into a 7-book series with 2 prequels. But that's not how it started out. It started out with me just like hobby writing and keeping
Mhm.
myself company and filling my brief amounts of free time. And because I used to have a lot of hobbies. I used to knit and I used to paint and do drawings and crochet and all these different things that when I became a mother, I just didn't feel like I had time for anymore. And
Mhm.
writing was something, and it still is something that I could pick up, write a couple paragraphs, oh, baby's awake, and then stop
Right.
doing it. And so that's kind of how it started out. And then uh I didn't I didn't set out to write a romance, and it sort of turned into one. And
Mhm.
then I got to the end of what I now call what's now book 3, was originally the end of the only book.
Right.
Uh and I got to the end of that, and it had this tragic ending, like, and then everybody died, the end.
Right.
And
Right.
and that is, Kirsha has read my books. She knows that that is not an understatement. That's something I would totally do and definitely did. And then
Mm.
I picked it back up and was like, you know what? I have more story to tell. And I brought them back to life and I wrote what's now book 4 and book 5 and book 6. Um, and so it wasn't originally like following the rules of a genre romance. Like, it didn't have a happily ever after. It didn't even have
Right.
a happy for now. I was telling like an excerpt in time of these
Mm.
people that I had
Mhm.
invented. And um and then over time it became a romance. And then last year when I thought, you know what, maybe I should publish. And I'm the kind of person that when I think maybe I should do something, I immediately jump in feet first into the deep end and start doing that thing.
Mhm.
And
Right, right.
so so I told my husband for months and months and months, like literally 3 days before I sent my book to an editor, I said, "I'm never going to publish them. You don't need to bring it up anymore, Chad. I'm not going to publish them." And
Mhm.
then I don't know, I thought about it some more and I was like, "Oh, by the way, I have an editor and I've sent my first book off and we'll see what happens." And you
Right,
know,
right.
now I'm releasing a book every 12 weeks like a crazy person. So
Oh, that is quite a schedule.
yes.
Yeah, I say kudos to you for that because
Really
it
kind
is not an easy thing. You and Kirsha both have like very
well, I'm
fast
aiming for every
schedules. Yeah.
6 months. She's 12 weeks. It's
Mm-hmm.
Mine are mostly written, so it's kind of a
Right.
different ball game. Is
Mhm.
that I wrote them before I was like,
Right.
okay, let's see about this. And of course,
That does
I'm
help.
adding things and subtracting things and
Absolutely.
changing small details. But
You know,
the
like
first
everyone
draft is
doesn't die
done.
now. It's
Yeah.
It
nice.
is nice though to have a buffer between when the book is written, edited, and then published.
Mhm.
It's nice to have kind of
Yes.
like if you have a couple of the books written first before you publish, that gives you
Mhm.
um, a little wiggle room, which can be really nice.
Yeah, and my whole process as an author is like it's just a dumpster fire. So I really have to do it
Ah,
that way.
now that you've brought it up,
Oh.
Yeah,
that
can you
is.
tell us a little bit about your process? Like
uh
from idea to sending it off to the editor.
from idea to sending it off to the editor. Um, well, first I sit down and I write 20,000 words. And the first 20,000 words of any first document that I open up is me just trying new things.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Sneaky Lass had 3 different 20,000 word beginnings, and
Mhm.
they
Oh.
were not Not related at all. All three of them
Mhm.
were completely different start points, completely different perspectives. And then I kind of picked the one that I felt like I could see the most of going forward.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the one that I ran with. And that's how all of my books start. And now that I've done that a couple of times, almost 11 times now, I've gotten better at knowing how to find that roadmap earlier, but I I still do an awful lot of writing in one direction and then thinking, "Oh, you know what? I can do that better," and putting it into a document to never be seen again and starting over.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Um, and sometimes those chapters, like the one of the three beginnings that I wrote to Sneaky Last became the beginning to book 4. Like it's just uh it's definitely me digging through a heap of stuff and
Right.
finding what works best. And that's why I've told Kirsha this before, is I really feel most comfortable before ever sending anything to an editor already knowing where the whole series is going. I didn't send
Right.
book 1 to an editor until book 6 was written.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And then I've written book 7 since, and 2 prequels, but it was like I would never be able to do what some people do, where they publish a book and then write the next book in the series, because I cannot tell you how many times I would write someone into book 3 who didn't exist in any of the previous books and then be like, gonna have to add them in.
Right. Right. Do a little backwards adjusting.
Yes.
Yeah. So, do you have do you plot a lot then when you're, or no, you just completely can't?
Just
No.
discovery, right? Some.
It's
Mhm.
discovery writing. I I would say the closest I ever come to plotting is when I have an idea of like the next few chapters. And
Right.
I tend to write each of my chapters a bit like a little mini story inside the book. Like each of
Okay.
my chapters tends to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Every once in a while I'll have 2 or 3 chapters where it's a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Mhm.
But I tend to tell scenes through chapters. And if I have an idea of the next couple and I don't want to forget, I'll go in my Word document and I'll type like chapter 12, one sentence about what happens, chapter 13, one sentence about what
Right.
happens, chapter
Mm-hmm.
14, one sentence about what happens. And then I get to the end of 14 and I'm like, all right, now what?
Yeah.
And I
Mhm.
usually have to like drive my son to the post office in the middle of nowhere and listen to a couple songs before it's like, now I have an idea.
Right. Right. That inspiration. I love that inspiration for you is so connected with your son too.
Oh
I think
yeah,
it'll be,
he's
yeah.
my little helper.
Yeah, we all need a writing buddy because, writing can be a solitary endeavor. Like it can be isolating, and like you said, your experience with motherhood in itself was a little bit isolating too.
Yes.
Essentially, being sleep deprived and having to be up every 90 minutes with your baby. I'm sure that was very stressful to go through.
Resonate very strongly
Yes.
with that story because
Yes.
you're alone. You have like almost no friends. Your brain is just spinning constantly because
Right.
you're so busy and you're so tired.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm trying to juggle so many things. Yeah.
And it's relentless. It's
And then you
absolutely
decide to take on a
relentless.
part-time job and write.
Yeah.
Right. Right. But like for creative people, if you're giving, you have to be creative in some way. You have to find a
Mhm.
vet for that, right? So you had, like you said, done knitting, yarn crafts, and visual art stuff, but not being able to just pick that up and go and drop it when you need to.
Mhm.
Right? Writing is a great outlet for creativity that allows you to kind of pick it up and go and drop it when you need to. So I'm really glad that you found another wonderful way to be creative,
Creative
right?
release for sure,
Mhm.
certain.
Yes. Yeah. I don't, there are people, and you see it all the time, where people talk about in writing groups, about how, like, how do you find the motivation to write? And it's like, for me, I am just
Mhm.
itching at the bit for somebody to
Mhm.
go take a nap so that I can write. And,
Right,
I spend all day thinking about, like, I want to be writing more. That's what I want to
right.
be doing more than anything else. Not that motherhood isn't wonderful. They're wonderful and I love them very, very much. But
Mhm.
it's like when as soon as everybody's asleep and I have a moment to myself, it's like, me time.
Right. We don't
Yeah.
want to forget who we are. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And it's easy to forget completely who you are and get very lost in motherhood. And I think for a time I did. And I think most women could respond to that, most mothers.
Yes,
Right.
completely. All
Mm.
right. So one thing that I particularly enjoy about your books is just the sheer amount of emotional impact that you're able to invoke, even with a single chapter, like or a single page. It can just gut punch you in the best way. Um, what tips would you give to other authors who are hoping to like invoke stronger emotions with their writing?
I think that the tip I would give to authors is to, it gets said all the time, but to write what you know.
Mm.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have gone through the exact thing that you're putting your characters through, though a lot of the things that my characters have gone through is something that I draw on from my own past, is that when you're writing an emotional scene, you don't necessarily have to have undergone this specific trauma that
Mhm.
you are writing about, but you've gone through trauma. You know what grief feels like, or, and even happy emotions. You know what overjoyed feels like. And you need to allow yourself to feel that yourself, like at your desk, on the couch, wherever it is that you write, to be able to put yourself in that moment and feel it again. And it's a brave thing to do, especially when you're
Right.
writing very difficult scenes and scenes that are very emotionally drawn from your own history. It's a brave thing to be able to sit down and be like, how did that feel? What are the
Mhm.
words that it takes to invoke that feeling?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's where I start when I'm writing any emotional scene. And I find myself the first draft, I shy from it. And I start writing, and then I'll read through it, and I'm crying while I'm writing it. And then the next time I read through it, it's like more. And
Mm.
I put myself there again, and go, what is this scene missing? This scene is missing these words, and
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I'll put those in. And then the third time I read through it, and you're crying again, and then you go, more, and you do it again. And so I think that the idea is to not allow yourself to be afraid of those scenes. And it's difficult to recognize when you're touching something but not digging into something.
Mm.
And I try really hard to make sure that even after I've read my book, like, you get towards the end, you've read it 18 times in
Mhm.
its final iteration, and you're about to hit publish, I still want to feel chills down my spine when I read that line, the one.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
you always know when you write it, it's like, yes, we finally got there. It took 4 drafts, and you had to dig in, and you had to read through some old journals, and you had to imagine yourself in that place over and over again, but you found that line, and it's like, that's the one that's going on the back of the book. That's the
Mhm.
one that everybody's going to read this line and be like, that's how it felt. And
Mm-hmm.
Right.
it doesn't matter what they've been through in their life, they're going to be able to connect it to something, because we're all human beings and we all connect emotionally to things. And somebody's going to
Mhm.
read that and go, that's what it felt like to lose my grandmother. Or that's what it
Mhm.
felt like when I found out I had a miscarriage. That's what it
Mhm.
felt like when I got in a car crash. Like,
Mhm.
that's what I'm looking for, is I'm looking for those words that connect the human experience. And finding those words is not always easy, but very worthwhile, and something that I take a great deal of thought and pride in my work.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I mean, there's a reason why they call it evocative, right?
Yes.
When it evokes the different emotions. I think that's the perfect adjective for this. I do like how you this leads into the next question perfectly. So they say often no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader, and you're talking about this, but what do you do to protect yourself and your mental health when you're accessing those deep emotions?
Nothing. This is, people say writing is therapy. This is definitely part of my therapy. And I've been through therapy. Like, let's be real.
Right.
You don't write books like I've written without doing that a little bit. But I find writing about it to be a form of protection from it, almost. I think that it comes right back to isolation. Going through trauma can be very isolating. And by giving some of that to my characters, which doesn't sound very friendly, but giving some of that to my characters in whatever iteration it is for them, is healing to me in a way. And when my readers say, like, oh, I just cried my way through this book, I always say it hurts so good, because I think that we all need that sometimes.
Right.
And I feel like when I write a scene that makes me cry, and I know that after I've worked on it and worked on it and worked on it and made it evocative, as you said, and I made it perfect as I can get it, I know that other people are going to cry with me. And it's not like it's not a sinister thing. It's just a human interaction. We are not alone. We've all felt this sort of
connection.
A connection. And I think that's why people connect so strongly with my books, and why people feel like they know me after they've read my books. And I would say that that's generally true, is anybody who's reading my books and being emotionally moved by my books know me pretty well. And so I really don't. I really lean into the way that those emotions make me feel. Just today, I was working on a project that's going to come much later. And I'm in that first 20,000 words mode of this project. And I was explaining the emotional connections of all these characters to my husband. He just looked over at me and went, "Aren't you writing as an escape? Like, why don't you ever write anybody who's just like happy people doing happy things?" And I was like, I don't know. Somebody's probably writing that way to escape. But to me, it's like, I don't know. I find a lot of peace in writing characters that feel like me, and feel like people I know, and feel like people who I could be friends with, as opposed to this ideal, especially that we work towards generally in romance. And I try to make people fall in love with characters that are people you might meet, and that's flaws and all.
Right. I, as much as we love an ideal, I think that when we can relate more, then of course we're gonna love those characters even more. Like, there's Superman's great, but everyone always roots for Batman, or like someone else.
Everybody's looking at Batman
that has flaws that they can relate to, and has that gritty humanness to them, right? That realness to them.
Yes.
I would
What?
Oh, I was just like, yes, one of her books is literally titled A Glorious Mess. And it is the perfect title, because it's the perfect description for the main character of that book. And sorry, I get a little bit blown away. You're really you're so amazing. Okay.
I mean, A Glorious Mess is
right. You're completely right about what you're drawing from, and it shows. So yes, I'm just trying not to fangirl that a little bit.
A Glorious Mess is really close to my heart, just because it's two characters that I feel like are the closest to myself, and well, actually, the closest to a version of me that doesn't exist anymore. And so it really feels like I pulled Mickey right out of my 20-year-old body and was like, ah, yes, you're an unlovable disaster. Good luck. And same with his lover, Hugh Digby, is like, here are all the grouchiest, worst parts of me. Let's see if we can't find you two unlovable people, someone to fall in love with you. And so that entire book was just a process of me really trying to figure out, like, I don't know, it was a discussion in worthiness of love. And I think that book was a passion project from the very beginning, of me trying to figure out who my characters were. I never intended to publish all of these notes and chapters and short stories that were really just me trying to sort out who the people in my main series were.
Right.
And then I was like, I think people might actually care about who these men were before they became the men that we knew. And that's where A Glorious Mess came from. And Kirsha actually started reading at the prequel, which was everybody else's third book in the series. And it made her see the whole series differently. And I've always really appreciated her feedback because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what are some pitfalls to writing, especially those strong emotions that you feel that others don't get quite right or that they might fall prey to?
I think that it's really tricky to make sure that you're peppering your very emotional books with moments of beauty. And that's something that I always try to avoid is, can I write an incredibly emotional book that has almost sometimes very dark themes and make it so that people don't feel bogged down by it, and give people enough moments of light to make them feel, to break up the monotony, because trauma is monotonous, and it's pushy and it gets in the way of things. And if every chapter has that, you need to have chapters where it's just the reminder that this is worthwhile.
Right.
And I always try to, after very dark discussions or emotionally deep discussions between my characters in a chapter, because my books are very dialogue based, very much interactions between characters. After having those types of scenes, I always have a scene afterwards of, moments with the crew, because they're on a ship. So moments with the crew where they're singing songs or telling stories, or finding that light that we find after those types of discussions. And
Right.
we all have that moment where you have a discussion with a friend and things got really heavy and you discussed things that you didn't necessarily feel comfortable discussing, and maybe you've had a glass of wine or two, and then the next morning you wake up and you're kind of nervous because what did they think of me now that I have
Right.
dumped all of that on them? And then your friend loves you anyway. And there's that moment of light. And I try to add those moments into my book too, is that these events are happening for a reason. We're becoming different people because of them. And sometimes that's not good, but a lot of the time we're learning more about ourselves, we're growing. And so my advice when writing books that are very heavy is to give people those moments to remember that this is a worthwhile story. We're going to get there. And I tell my readers that all the time when they're like, why would you do that? Like, we're going to get there. You're going to find out. Just keep reading. Like,
Right.
it's all going to tie together in the end with a beautiful little bow, and we're going to be better for this very, very sad moment, I promise. And I think that would be my advice.
Right, to introduce a little levity and light moments as well as the dark. Because yeah, life is a balance. Like, you have silly moments where you guys just bust out laughing after sharing just trauma with each other, with friends usually. So
Being the characters, giving the readers that taste of hope, that
Yes.
dawn that comes after the dark. Yes.
Right. So this is an impossible question, but we'll ask it anyways. How do you balance life with writing?
I wish I had a better answer for that question.
Right. We all wish we knew the secret, right?
Yeah. The first thing I would recommend would be to have my husband, because he is incredibly supportive and very protective of my writing and my time to write. And like, I'm going to this event in September that I have no business going to. It's like 3 days and there's going to be a ball. And I'm like, I'm going to have a child turning 4 a couple days after it. My daughter's medically complicated at the moment and is going to continue to be. And they've never been away from me for any length of time. And I'm just going to vanish for to 6.5 hours from here to go and sign books and party with my friends, and I have no business going to do that. And he's like, no, you have to. You have to go do that. Like, like you deserve to go do that. So I guess the first
Mm.
thing that is my work-life balance with writing is that I have a magnificent husband.
Mhm.
And the rest of it is that I really do try to make time to do it, even if I have to write on my phone, even
Right.
if I'm just thinking about it all the time. My whole music playlist is music that makes me think about my characters and makes me think about what they're going to do next.
Right.
And so driving to the post office to ship off signed copies with my 3.5-year-old, that's writing time. And I just, keep it going. Um, and I don't get mad at myself if I don't, but I also consider everything writing time, and that makes me feel way better about it. So, editing, that's writing time.
Right.
Daydreaming, that's writing time. I am accomplishing
Absolutely.
something even when I'm not writing words, and and I think that that's just generally good advice anyway. It's all part of the process. When I'm on TikTok
Mm.
making videos to try and get people to go read my books, that's writing time.
Right. 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 No, I think that it's very important to recognize that writing is more than just sitting at the computer and typing, right? Writing is all of the thinking and the building and the developing that goes on behind the scenes too.
And taking care of the small business that is you. Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
All right. So, can we ask what is your favorite part of writing?
My favorite part of writing is crying while I write.
Right. Processing everything.
Yeah, I love those moments too where it all clicks and comes together.
Yeah,
Uh,
those eureka moments.
yeah, it doesn't happen terribly often, but every once in a while you write something and it's like, yeah. And then 3 months later you read it and you're on, yeah, that's still right. It's still
Yeah.
good. It's so good. Um, when I'm reading books that I've already published and I forget that I'm the one who wrote it because it's like, man, this sounds like a professional did this. Look at me.
Mhm.
Um, and I really it's like, is it bad to say it's like being a marathon runner. My favorite part of the marathon is finishing.
Yeah.
My favorite part is holding my book at the end.
Right.
And
Yeah.
when people finish reading it and tell me how much they loved it, uh, I love that. I never get tired of that.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
and it really does make me feel like a whole person. And I've never had anything that I've been makes me sound kind of conceited. I've been very good at a lot of things in my life. I have
Mhm.
I was very good academically. I was a very talented artist. I went to art school. I have always I found academics very interesting and so it made it easy to study. I sang and I sing beautifully.
Mhm.
I traveled all over the world singing and I taught and I was a very adept, very good teacher and I didn't really enjoy much of any of it.
Oh,
and
okay. Yeah.
and and so writing is the first thing where I think it's like I might be good at this and I
Mhm.
feel fulfilled. I feel like I'm doing it just for me and everything that I am self-published. And so every day that I make $22 in royalties, I'm like, wow,
Mhm.
$22. That's really something. And every day I make
Right.
16 cents in royalties. It's like 16 cents. That's really something. Like look at that.
Mhm.
I I did that all by myself. Um
Right.
and I didn't have any help. This all came from me and my stories and I would read them and think it needs this. And I would read them and think if this could be better. And through years of doing that, I have created something that resonates with a lot of people and that makes me
Mhm.
feel really good, really proud. And I'm excited for my children to be old enough one day to probably never read my books because who thinks their mom's really cool, but that's fine. They one day might be proud to be able to say that I'm an author, and maybe they're
Yeah.
going to write books, or maybe they won't. But because I did, maybe they'll think, like, "I've always really wanted to do this."
Right. Mhm.
And they'll think, "And my mom did that." And I really want my kids to feel comfortable reaching for those things that make them feel passionate, because I was
Right.
really not encouraged to do that as a
Right.
child. And I think that it's important. It's important to feel fulfilled in your life and
Mm.
find joy in the things that you do, and bring joy to others with the things that you do. So I really love everything about it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, your joy is so like visible that it's making me a little emotional. We're talking about emotional writing. Well, this conversation is becoming emotional writing for me.
Julie and I are both writers as well, and you're talking about, we're like, yes, that is the best part. Just
That's the
Right.
thing. Yes.
Right.
That's what we're all looking for.
Yeah, oh my gosh, yeah, I have chills.
when it
Um,
all comes together.
yeah,
And
yeah.
love it too.
There's nothing better than the feeling, like, the best feeling to me was the first time I published and I held a book and I was just like, wow, I made this. Yeah, like that
Yes.
feeling. It's so hard to describe to people who haven't had a similar moment. But yeah, when you're just like, wow, this is like my dream in a tangible thing I'm now holding, and it's like
real.
come true.
It's real now.
It's a
Yes.
very so fulfilling. Yeah.
I
It's the best
remember
feeling.
the first time I got, so funny author story, baby author, Amazon, which is who I primarily published through, though I've done some work through Ingram Spark, makes it so that you can do pre-orders for ebooks, but you
Mm.
can't do pre-orders for paperbacks. Well, I didn't know that. And they make it really easy. There's this bright yellow button at the bottom of the page. You set up your book, and then there's this bright yellow button that says publish. And I'd
Mm.
already published my ebook for pre-order. And
Ah.
then it says, after you do that, it gives you this pop-up window that says, are you ready to set up your paperback? And I was like, why, yes, I am. And I clicked it and I set it up. And then my book published like 6 weeks early.
Right. Yeah.
And but the bright side to that is that I immediately ordered myself a copy and then unpublished it. And they sent me this beautiful copy of my book, and it's just riddled with errors. I hadn't done any proofreading yet. It was for pre-order.
Right.
It was still with my editor. But I'd formatted it and sent it in, and they send me this book, and I just hold it. And I actually did it on camera, and I posted it on TikTok, and you see I'm like crying and hyperventilating.
Right.
I'm like, look, you guys, like,
yeah,
my book gets riddled with errors and formatted weird. It's done. Like, I've written it.
It is. No, it's such an accomplishment. And I always tell people like that you should be so proud, because everyone says like, oh, if I had the time or I have a story to tell, but to actually sit down and write it and then do all the steps that are involved in editing and publishing it and making it a tangible thing, like that is such an accomplishment. And I wish everyone celebrated every small little victory. So definitely they should celebrate those big victories, like publishing a book, let alone now you've published how many. So yeah.
Quite a few now.
Yes, I'm up to 4. It'll be 5 this week. I send out ARCs for 5th. So
oh yay, that's so exciting. All right. So on the other side of that though, what is your least favorite part of writing?
Drafting.
Okay.
I've told you about my process, which is like a raccoon digging through the Sonic dumpster for tater tots. Like it's a nightmare. And I despise it so much that it's almost like taking medicine to me. I want to get the first draft done. It doesn't need to be good. It doesn't need to even make sense, but I need like those 80,000 words to exist on paper so that I can start working on making them better. Like here's the story, A to Z. We are going to get to the end of it, and most of it's written. That's what I'm looking for. And once that's done, everything else I love. Drafting, though, I'm usually like, I am going to write 3,000 words every single day for the next month, and then it will be done, and I can start the next thing. So I try to like plug your nose, take it like NyQuil. That's how drafting is for me. Like, rough drafts are rough.
Oh, for sure.
Oh yes. Or sometimes even the final drafts are rough when they turn out not to actually be the final draft. You get final draft 0.2, final draft 0.5.
Yes.
Right. Final is
Final draft.
right, is what always happens. Yeah.
Yeah, you end up with like final draft for the editor, final draft for the editor 2, final
Yep,
draft for
yeah.
the editor 3.
This is really the
Yes,
final, yeah.
Yes.
sounds great.
Final draft
Right.
after I added those 4 scenes the editor told me to add.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. Oh, drafting. Yeah, it's a whole thing. I love this quote that is just like my favorite part of writing is having written, right? Like
Yes.
when you're finished and you're just like, "Oh, that felt so good now that I'm done with it."
Yes.
But you love it because you did it, even though while you were doing it, you were just like, "Why do I do this to myself?"
Oh,
I
time to do it all again.
Yes, I had a friend post just the other day something like, "I sure am ready for the end of this book to be written. Can someone else
Right.
please come write it for me?"
Right. Oh my gosh, yeah. Oh, that's too funny. Um, do you have writing advice that you like and would share with like a newer author?
I always feel like I'm full of trite advice because everybody says the same thing. But I really do feel like the best advice I can give somebody who wants to start writing is to start writing.
Mhm.
It's just like you were saying, it's a huge accomplishment to write a book. A lot of people say how much they want to write a book. A lot of people talk about how they have a story in them and they just haven't found the time to start. And I would encourage them to make time. Because
Mhm.
if you want to write and you want to be writing, life doesn't wait for you and your hobbies.
Mm-mm.
And I've found as a mother, I have to be very protective of my hobbies. Um, is, is that you have to sit down, turn everything off, and start writing, even if it's not good. It's just like drafting. I mean, 3,000 words every single day for a month is a whole book.
Mhm.
And it's a long book. And after that you can make it better. But you cannot edit an unwritten page.
Right.
And I just feel like a lot of people get caught up in the I don't have enough time, or there are too many things in my way, or I don't know how, and you just have to start. I
Mhm.
have a friend of mine and she doesn't like she's never written anything. She reads a lot. And because of because she reads so much, her ability to craft a story that was worth reading is impeccable.
Mhm.
Beautiful. Her plot, her characters, I cared about them from the first page, but she didn't know how to use a quotation mark. She was a high school dropout,
Mhm.
did not um did not have any real formal education because of her history and her background.
Mhm.
And I told her, I was like, "You have created characters in the first 3 pages of this book." And she's written the whole book. I'm like, "You've created characters in the first 3 pages of this book that I want to know the rest of their story."
Mhm.
You can hire somebody to put in all the quotation marks. You
Right.
can read a book about where commas go. Not many people have the talent to create whole worlds that readers are going to care about.
Right.
And if you have that in you, start would be my
Right.
advice. You have to start writing. Don't let those things you don't know stop you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
There's storytelling and then there's the mechanics, which you
yes.
can always get help on mechanics later. Mhm.
Yeah. And you send your first book to the editor and they send it back to you with this big, like 6,000 word write up at the end. And and it has like 12,000 notes on it that you have
Right.
to edit
Right.
because it's your first book. And by the time you send them your fourth book, because you've implemented all of the things that you've learned from your
Right.
editor in the first book and the second book, you're getting better and better at it. Your manuscripts get cleaner and cleaner. You're able to find those plots and also find the holes in those
Mhm.
plots all by yourself. You don't need any more help,
Mhm.
and you don't get to doing that unless you start your first book.
Mhm.
And in my case, I already had the first 6 books written. I sent my first book to my editor. She sent it back and had a video call with me about the things that I was doing really well. Like she's like, "You just
Mhm.
have an innate ability to understand the emotions and, the human condition and all this stuff." And she's like, but this is not how you write. Not every piece of dialogue needs a dialogue tag. Please stop. And and then you're able to go through all of the next 5 books and just kind of take every single one of them out. Or even something smaller, like I didn't know that you capitalized the Navy. I didn't know that Navy was capitalized ever. And so it was never capitalized. And my books take place a lot around the Navy. I wrote a whole book taking place in the Navy because I had gone to naval museums and I had talked to naval historians and I knew all this stuff. I did not know that word was capitalized. And so you just learn as you go. And the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. And you can't get better at it unless you start.
Absolutely.
A great amount of learn by doing in writing.
Yes.
Right. And that's a skill, I think, to also take on feedback that you were giving previously and apply that to future projects, because not everyone has that skill. We'll just say that. As an editor, sometimes people don't learn from their mistakes, but that's okay, because that's still why we have editors, right?
Yes, so and every book's going to have different weird problems. Like I wrote all of book 4, which it was just with my editor last month. I wrote all of that book in the course of like 10 days. It is 90,000 words. I wrote it in 10 days. And then I edited the fire out of it and I sent it to her. But because I tend to draft so fast, so much so fast, each book has its own weird set of issues where you get stuck in a rut. And so book 4 was filled with adverbs to a point where my editor just started highlighting them. And she didn't even leave notes. She just highlighted every single ly word in my manuscript. And every couple of pages, she would just write, you know what to do. And, she's right.
Right.
And then, of course, you finish editing book 4 and you're just like, well, now I can't even say an adverb without thinking that I need to do some great simile. But,
Right. Yeah. Some adverbs are okay, though. I hate when people are like, you can't have any, or you can't do this or that ever. Like, we talk about it a lot on the show. Like, there are no absolutes, right? So
yeah.
But we definitely have crush words. We definitely have crush words and stuff like that. Absolutely.
I now have a Word document on my desktop of my computer that is just like the adverbs that we took out a lot of in book 4, so that I can go to the search and find in all look for the works and be like, how many times did I say the word eventually? Maybe we could take all of them out.
Even just ever. Those are my chronic use words. I also have to do search for hand, eyes, smile, shrug, grin, smirk.
Smile and nodding. My characters do so much of that. I'm like, are they even people, or are they smile and nodding robots? Like, I read back a line and I'm like, oh, she smiled while she said this. I'm like, Julia, she smiled in the last like 15 things that she's done. Like, let's chill a little on that.
Yeah, my editor once had a really embarrassing conversation with me. I was red-faced by the end because she was just like, man, all of these pirates are just super happy in this scene. I mean, so happy. Look at how much they're smiling and laughing. All of them in every line. Like,
Oh goodness, yeah. And that's what we love editors, because like they catch our mistakes, because we're so familiar with stuff. It's hard to see it. That's why we need a second pair of eyes sometimes. But when they call us out, though, it's just like, do you have to like twist the knife while you stab me? Like,
ouch.
Hurts a little bit. Yeah, it hurts a little.
With my first book, I'm like, I am the best writer ever. This is going to be so awesome. They're going to find almost nothing. No, it was thousands of suggested edits.
Right.
You see, I was the opposite boat.
Already so much more to learn.
I sent the sneaky last to my editor, and she had it for like a week, and I could see in the Google Doc she was doing stuff to it. And then she went, can we have a video chat? And I was like, she's going to tell me that my book is crap and that she can't be hired by me and that I need to give up. That's what she's going to tell me. And of course, like she just has, her video call is just like, here are the 3 things that I'm noticing that you can go ahead and work on your next couple of releases on. And I was like,
Right, right. What a relief though, yeah, because it's like getting that text where it's like we need to talk, and you're like, but what? Like about what? You can't leave me hanging, and like my anxiety could never, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, I
I
she
imagine,
got
yeah,
on and I was like, "So this is it, right? You're gonna send my document back to me and be like, huh, wow, what garbage. Anyway, give
right.
up on that dream."
Oh, hopefully never, right? Hopefully we never hear
Yeah.
those words, yeah. Um, so what? Okay, we're gonna jump ahead a little bit.
Mhm.
Okay.
But what is your favorite book or author and why?
My favorite book is Complementary Colors by Adrienne Wilder.
Okay.
It is not very well known. She is a self-published indie author. I do not know her. I've never met her. Uh, I read her book, Complementary Colors, in the middle of the night. It was the first and only book. My sleep is very important to me. It was the first and
Mm,
only book that I stayed up all night to finish it. And I think that the reason it stands out to me is because it was so different from what I would typically read. I've always been I well, since I've been an adult, I've been a reader of romance, I've been a reader of fantasy, I read a lot of historical romance, and this is like a contemporary murder mystery romance
mhm,
with a big overarching mental health theme. And I think that part of it was that I had just gotten out of treatment for an eating disorder. So I had a terrible eating disorder. I was in treatment for it, continuously inpatient treatment for almost a full year before I
mm,
was finally able to go home, was finally healthy enough to start even just like intensive outpatient treatment.
mhm,
And I had just done all of that and really was coming to terms with the fact of how out of my mind I had been.
mhm.
And which is really something to come to terms with. I mean, you feel
Right,
sane, but everybody's looking at you like, lady. Um,
right,
and you know, you don't end up in locked eating disorder units for months at a time unless you've really lost it. But when you get there, you're like, I don't need to be here. And that's how
right.
everybody gets there. It's just
Mhm,
like a universal thing. I don't know if it's in all mental illness, but it was certainly true of anorectics, anoretics and bulimics.
mhm,
None of us believed that we needed to be anywhere. We weren't
mhm.
sick. And and so I read this book, and it was this character who he was really hitting the nail on the head of being completely out of his mind. And he was seeing things, and the way he was perceiving the words of others were not what was actually happening,
Right,
and dealing with family who he really felt like was gaslighting him, and at the same time meeting somebody who he was falling in love with but also wanted to keep at a distance because he kind of knew that he was toxic because
right.
of where he was at mentally. And I was like, I had just met the man who is now my husband,
Mhm,
and I just kind of had this feeling of like, I don't know how I don't really know who I am right now.
mhm,
And and I was still trying to come to terms with a lot of things with my own mental health, and I picked up this book, and it was just so different from anything I'd ever read, and I devoured it. I think I read it in
mm,
about 5 hours, and that was years ago. That was
mhm.
almost a decade ago now. And I still, when people ask me what's the book you think everybody should read? I think everybody should read Complementary Colors by Adrienne Wilder. I She doesn't know me. She probably doesn't know that I am her biggest hype girl. I'm like, you guys have got to get in this book. It has a beautiful cover. It's on Kindle Unlimited. Everybody should check it out. It's a
Yeah.
little spicy. It's one of the best tellings of the best shows of mental illness that I've ever seen, and it has this great like mystery tie-in. I really can't say enough about it. I really loved it.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a absolutely wonderful book that I will definitely have to check out. So thank you for sharing your story and that
Thank you.
recommendation. I think that mental health is like such a it's so tricky, right? Because like depictions of it a lot of times are not kind, right? So
Yeah.
having accurate and also positive representation, of course, is like makes such a difference. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we appreciate that, Rack.
Without pulling the soul out of it, because it's easy
Right.
in writing to have representation, but it's missing the color and the soul and the nuance of it as well.
Right.
So
Yes.
when you can find someone who's captured that so well, you just want to hug them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Right. Right.
Okay, so we have a question we love to ask everybody. What is writing advice that you hate?
Hmm.
They just
I
did not agree with you at all.
I don't know if I have any writing advice that I hate. I can't think of any where when somebody says it, it just immediately grinds my gears.
Okay,
I
that's fair.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of show don't tell,
Mm-hmm.
not because it's bad advice, but because I think that it's very generic advice that new
Right.
authors can very easily fall into a pit of, I don't even know what that means.
Right.
And there's still even moments after I've written so many books is when people say show don't tell. My editor and I speak on a daily basis. We are good friends now. She's read all of my books. I take her advice very seriously. She's never led me wrong. And still there are times when she says, show this. And I'm like, I've already shown it.
Mm-hmm.
And usually then I can message her and she can clarify for me. But it just feels like there are moments where it's like, I don't know, this feels good.
Mm-hmm.
Have I not shown it enough? You know what this word means. And sometimes I get really defensive of my adverbs. I'm like, that is a good adverb and it tells you exactly what I am talking about. Thank you very much. And I
Right.
still always take it out and find a way to show it. But still, I think that word can that advice can come across as a little gatekeepy to new
Right.
authors who may not know what that means yet. And
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't get explained very well because then people are just like, well, you just cut out these words and, that sort of thing. And, like don't say the word suddenly, show suddenly. It's like, sometimes it's okay to write suddenly. It's okay. It's
Oh,
not the end of the
absolutely.
world. A
Mm-hmm.
good editor will teach you how to do that. Uh, and
Right. Right.
so I guess that's the only time is poorly clarified advice. That goes with just kind of everything is
Right.
I do feel strongly, as I've said before, that everybody who feels like they have a story to tell shouldn't feel like they can't tell it because they don't know how.
Right.
We all know words, write it the way you can, and then you'll sort out the rest later. And
Absolutely.
so any advice that comes across as kind of gatekeepy, like you can't write anything good if you're doing this,
Mm.
that's always kind of that's my only pet peeve.
Right.
I'm a
Right.
believer in, give everybody's book a chance. Everybody's writing style is different. Like I'm reading Kirsch's book right now, and her writing style is about as opposed to my writing style as I can possibly imagine. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful book. And there's still moments where I'm
Right.
like,
Right.
well, I would have written it in first person because of course I would. It's how I write everything. And so like I would never give the advice like to really drive home your emotional books, write in first
Right.
person. And I've
Right.
seen people say that before. It's like if you're writing an emotional book, you need to write in this point of view or this perspective or this tense, and
Right.
anything
Right.
like that. I'm always just like, yeah, BS. Like we can all make
Right.
everything work for everybody. I
Yeah.
believe in the power of people and their minds and their creativity, and we can create beautiful things while not following all of the rules. So
No, absolutely. That's one of the reasons why we wanted to do this show is because there's so many different ways of writing as much as there's different people who write, right? So
yes.
we wanted to show, just learn from other authors, their journey and their perspective on writing and stuff, because maybe that'll show that there's such a varied difference between all of us and you can do it your own way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being a part of the show. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank
Can
you.
you
Thank you
tell
for
us
having me.
where we can find you online?
Oh, yes. I am most active on TikTok, author Kennedy Sutton. I post content there every day. But if you want the specialized content because you read my books and you want to know all about the history of my characters and how I named them and about ships and about sails and anchors and short stories and everything, you need to go to my Facebook group, Sutton Silver Locket Crew. And I pretty much accept everybody. We're 127 strong, and we're a lot of fun. And you can also find me on Instagram, but I'm literally never there. Once every 3 months, I show up on Instagram, post a link to my new release, and go, "Hey, I wrote a new book," and then I disappear for 3 more months. And same with my main Facebook page. Like, join my group. My Facebook page doesn't have anything on it.
Right.
And I also sell signed copies, which are the exact same price as they are on Amazon, but they come with bookmarks, and of course they're signed. And sometimes I throw other things into the box because I'm maniacal that way. And you can find those on my Etsy shop, Kennedy's Books. And I also have a website if you're just interested in viewing the generic author website with all of my books and bio information, which is kennedysutton.com. Try to keep things simple.
Yeah, I know, right? It can be so complicated, but it's also so fun to like come up with social media handles. So
Yeah.
it's like, do I want to be easy to find or do I want to have fun? Like that's the struggle of like writers because we love playing with language. So
Oh yeah. This is a pen name, and I invented it because my maiden name is a Polish monstrosity that nobody can pronounce, and my married name is Smith. And I was
right,
like, "Ooh, there's an awful lot of me on the internet."
right. Yeah.
You want to be
Well,
findable.
how they almost
Yes, I want to be findable. Exactly.
yeah. Well, thank you so much again for joining us. And thank you for everyone at home listening along. And remember, there's always more than one way up a mountain. If you're interested in being a guest on our show, you can find us on social media at The Tell Not Show, or you can email us at thetalnotshow@gmail.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed the show, consider subscribing and liking. We appreciate all the support. Julia J.K. Allen is an author, editor, and coach and can be found at hijingsrudder.com.
Kirsha Fox is an author, avid reader, gamer, and mother to four, and you can find her at kirshafox.com. Thanks and see you next time.